I was happy to see that an older video of mine, Implied Description, got a video response today from Sameoldji. And he sent me a message after saying that he was a little worried about how the language might have seemed stronger than he intended. But, you know, I watched this video response and I think he made some very valid points. Why, this is one of my favorite questions, why would you use such a technique? And I think we should be asking why with every technique we employ. What is the effect of this technique? Why would I do it? I just did a video a couple days ago on initiative, and that's the key point of that clip. Why do you do initiative the way that you do it? What effect would you like it to have in your game? I feel that a lot of, let's say, complaints that people have with a system, either when it's new to them or, you know, after they're starting to get comfortable with it, is they want to make changes to things that that don't suit them, that either because they work differently than other games that they've played, or they don't like the way that the game feels when that technique is in play. I feel that identifying very specifically the effects of each technique and choosing to use them to produce that effect is where we need to be going in order to achieve real comfort, real familiarity, and real control over our game system and therefore over our gaming experience. You hear a lot of people say that system matters, and I think that expression gets overused. System matters, obviously, but what does it matter to? That's what you need to know. You hear a lot about you can't do this in a certain game. Why not? Is it because there's no explicit rule giving you, the players of that game, permission to do that in this game? Is it because there's no information for you to use to be able to pull off that effect in this game? Or is it because you don't know how to do that? You know, system matters. But how? Why does a specific technique exist? What is it for? So when Sameoldji asks, why would I want to do this? Why would I want to provide subliminal description in a game session? He's absolutely right to ask. Why? What effect will it have? Now, I thought it was clear in the video, but maybe it's not. I mean, it is a very long video. The reason why I would choose that technique is to help reassure or support player decision. Meaning, one of the examples that I think I used in the clip was about a dishonest NPC. I feel that in real life there are many, many cues that we are exposed to about dishonesty, which it's very difficult to represent in a role-playing game if all you're doing is describing things with your language. In fact, if you're not going to be, you know, using body language or facial expressions or vocal tone to convey some of these, you know, natural hints about an NPC's dishonesty, then you are forced to tell the players directly that that NPC is dishonest, meaning they don't get the benefit or the joy or the experience of discovering that for themselves. You, as the game master who created the NPC and who's monitoring the situation of what that NPC is doing, you know that they're dishonest, which means two things. One, because if it's a game master and player, you know, setup for the game, then it's an objective fact for you that that NPC is dishonest. If you're playing in a game where you're not going to, you know, be altering facts in the background, then, you know, that NPC is dishonest. If you don't want to be cornered into having to say, okay, roll your, you know, perception or roll your diplomacy to detect dishonesty. Oh, you failed. You don't know she's dishonest. You know what I mean? If you don't want to be in that situation, using this technique of implied description, of subliminal description, to communicate these obvious, natural, like real-world hints, is the way to go. You give the player the chance to sense the dishonesty of the NPC without having to be forcibly told or put in a box of, now you know the NPC is dishonest. As I say in the clip, this is a technique that you use after you've come to know your players and have a good sense of how they react to people. It gives you a hint about what kind of body language, what kind of expressions, what kind of phrasing you should use to trigger the reaction you think they really would notice if they really were there. Sameoldji also asked about dishonesty. Are you being dishonest if you're doing this? And that would be possible if you, as the game master, were trying to become what's known in literature as an unreliable narrator, where the NPC is actually honest, but for the sake of your story, which you are creating and casting around the characters, you need them to believe that the NPC is dishonest. So you confuse them, you befuddle them, you trick them, you lie to them, and force them to think one thing when the other is actually true. That's not the technique I was recommending. You can certainly use it that way if you like, but it requires that you have a script that you're following. The second part of this video is also very interesting. The listening between the lines. Do players really pick up on what you're saying? And movies like Sixth Sense give us a way to see this. Now, there's this concept called the curse of knowledge, which completely encapsulates this idea. When you're trying to figure out what to tell your players or what not to tell your players, or what to layer in there in this implied description, if you want them to listen between the lines, as Sameoldji says, you need to remember what it's like not to know the things that you know as the game master. See, the hints that you're trying to layer, they need to be the hints that they need, not the hints that make sense to you. And often, because of this curse of knowledge, your inability to recast yourself in the role of someone who knows nothing about this, you end up giving hints that are too subtle, that are too hidden, that require too much background knowledge. And you'll notice that suddenly at a point in a campaign, after you've been dropping what you think are obvious hints, again and again and again and again, the lights suddenly come on. They finally had enough of these vague and subtle hints that they suddenly get it. And we move to the conclusion of the story, or we move to the resolution of the problem. If it takes far too many of these hints, you know that you've been far too subtle. If you watch the director's commentary on The Sixth Sense, they get into this in a great deal of detail. They talk about how the director was convinced that he'd given away the ending far too many times as you go through the movie. But of course, very few people were actually able to figure out what's going on in that film until it's revealed. Then when they go back and watch it again, they realize that they were shown all the way through. It takes a certain kind of mind, I think, to pick up these subtle cues in film or in literature. And being distracted, being tired, being busy, thinking you're just sitting down to, like a beer and pretzels game, but you're actually in a really deep mystery or intrigue scenario, can all be reasons to miss these. And not everybody's going to catch clues all the time. And what I'm getting at is that if you want them to be able to listen between the lines, you have to be willing to make what they're listening to more explicit, more overt. The technique does work, but it takes finesse on the part of the game master that might take more than just months to develop. It requires a strong relationship with the players, a great command of the way that they see things, the way that your mystery is unfolding, and a lack of fear of blowing the end of whatever it is you've got planned. And again, for this kind of technique, there really does need to be an explicit ending. It's not something that can be rising organically out of the background unless you limit yourself simply to enhancing the description of objects, items, NPCs, and locations, that sort of thing. Anyway, thank you very much for the video response. No worries, not offended. I was pleased at all the points that you raised, and I'm looking forward to more discussions on these kind of techniques in the future.